He paid me 5 million Nigerian nairas to pretend I was his wife. He never knew I was already planning his downfall. He slid the contract across the table like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. 6 months, he said. You wear my ring. You smile for my cameras. You call me husband when my mother visits. And when it's over, you walk away with 5 million naira and I never see your face again. I should have said no. I should have stood up, straightened my worn-out blazer, and walked out of that glass tower like I still had my dignity. Instead, I picked up the pen. Because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't marrying Adrian Okafor for the money. I was marrying him to destroy him. That M.Y. name doesn't matter yet. Not to him. Not that day. That day, I was just a woman in interview room 4, seat number 12, resume trembling slightly in my hands because the air conditioning was set to a temperature that punished poverty. I had walked 40 minutes to save transport money. I had rehearsed my smile in a cracked phone screen. I had told myself, today is the day things change. I didn't know how right I was. I didn't know how wrong I was, too. The receptionist called my name, mispronounced, the way rich buildings always mispronounce the names of people who don't belong in them, and I walked into an office that cost more to decorate than my mother's entire hospital bill. He wasn't behind the desk. He was standing at the window, back to me, hands in his pockets, looking down at Lagos like it owed him something. Sit, he said. Not please sit. Not good afternoon. Just sit. I sat. He turned around slowly, and for 1 second, one small, dangerous second, I forgot why I hated men like him. Adrian Okafor was 34 years old and looked like money had been poured over him at birth and never washed off. Tailored suit. Watch worth more than my father's shop. Eyes that had learned, a long time ago, that the world would forgive him anything. You're not here for the marketing position, he said. My stomach dropped. Excuse me. I read your file. He tapped a folder on his desk, my resume. Yes, but also something else. Something thicker. Your father's medical debt. Your mother's shop, seized 8 months ago. Your younger sister, final year. University fees unpaid. 3 weeks from being sent home. I smoothed through my chest. How do you? I make it my business to know things, he said simply. It's why I'm rich and everyone else is applying for jobs. I stood up. I don't know what kind of interview this is, but I... Sit down, he said, and this time there was something under his voice. Not a threat exactly, but the certainty of a man who had never once been told no and meant it. I have a proposal. Not employment. Something better. Every instinct told me to leave, but my sister had 3 weeks. I sat back down. I need a wife, he said, for 6 months. My grandmother controls 40% of this company's shares, and her will states that I inherit full control only if I am, in her words, settled. Married. Stable. She's dying, Miss Adiz. She wants to see me married before she goes, and I intend to give her that peace while I take my company. So get married, I said. Find someone who actually wants you. Something flickered behind his eyes, amusement maybe, or warning. Love makes people sloppy. Love asks questions. Love wants forever. I don't have forever to give anyone, and I don't want a woman who'll fall for the act and make things complicated when the 6 months end. And I'm supposed to be, what's safe? Because I'm desperate. Because you're smart, he said, and because 5 million naira solves every problem currently sitting on your shoulders. He slid the folder toward me. Inside, a contract. Terms. A number that made my vision blur for exactly 1 second. 5 million Nigerian nairas. Enough to save the shop. Enough for the hospital. Enough for my sister's final year and the year after that. 6 months, he said again. You live in my house. You wear my ring. You perform my marriage for my family, my board, and my grandmother. In return, when it ends, you disappear with your money, and I disappear with my inheritance. No feelings. No complications. A transaction between two people who understand exactly what the world is. I looked at that number for a long time. Then I looked at him, at the calm, practiced cruelty of a man who thought people like me were pieces to be moved, not remembered. I thought about my mother's hands, cracked from years of tailoring dresses she could no longer afford the fabric for. I thought about my father's cough, the one the doctors said would kill him without treatment he couldn't afford. I thought about my sister, Chidinma, 21 years old and terrified of losing everything she'd worked for. And underneath all of it, quiet, cold, and growing, I thought about something else. I thought about the name on his company letterhead, Okafor Holdings, the same company that, 4 years ago, had quietly, legally, mercilessly bought out and buried my father's small logistics business, the business that had put food on our table for 15 years, through a hostile acquisition engineered by a young, ambitious executive named Adrian Okafor. He didn't recognize the name Adiz Nwosu. He had no reason to. To him, my father was a line item in a merger report, a statistic, a stepping stone. To me, he was the reason my father's hand shook every time he heard the word contract. Adrian Okafor was offering me a seat inside the very house that had helped build itself on my family's ruin. I smiled, the first real smile I'd given him. I have conditions, I said. His eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting. He liked that I pushed back. Men like him always mistake resistance for spirit, never for strategy. Name them. I want the money split, half now, half at the end. I want my own room in your house, not shared quarters. And I want it in writing that you will never touch me without my consent, ever, under any circumstance, contract or not. Something shifted in his face. Respect, maybe. Or the beginning of underestimating me even further, which was exactly what I needed. Done, he said. Anything else? Yes, I thought. I want to watch everything you've built fall apart in your hands. I want you to feel what my father felt the day he lost everything. I want you to learn my name the way I learned yours, with dread. No, I said instead. That's all. He extended the pen. I signed my name, the name he didn't recognize yet, beneath his. Adiz Nwosu. He would remember it soon enough. The house was not a house. It was a monument. 6 bedrooms. A pool that reflected the sky, like it was trying to compete with it. Staff who moved like ghosts, trained never to ask questions. I was given a room on the east wing, beautiful, cold, and utterly unlived in, like a hotel suite designed by someone who had never actually slept in it. You'll meet the staff tomorrow, Adrian said that first night, standing in the doorway of my new prison, with the posture of a man used to owning every room he entered. Tomorrow evening, my grandmother arrives. You will need to know everything about our story. Our story, I repeated flatly. How we met. Our first date. The proposal. He said it like reading a grocery list. I've prepared a document. Of course he had. I read it that night by lamplight. A fabricated love story, so carefully constructed it was almost impressive. We'd met at a charity gala. He'd been struck by my intelligence. I'd been drawn to his ambition. It read like a press release, because that's exactly what it was designed to be. I memorized it like a soldier memorizing a mission brief, because somewhere beneath the fake story, I was writing my own. Grandmother Okafor arrived the next evening in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse, wrapped in fabric that probably cost more than my father's hospital bill, with eyes so sharp they made me forget, for a moment, that she was supposedly dying. She studied me for a long time before she spoke. You don't look like the women he usually brings around, she said. Is that a compliment, Ma? I asked carefully. A small, dangerous smile. We'll see. Dinner was a performance in itself. Adrian played his role flawlessly. A hand on my back that lingered exactly as long as affection required. Eyes that found mine at exactly the right dramatic beats. A laugh at my jokes that sounded almost real. Almost. I played mine better. I laughed at his stories. I touched his arm when the script called for it. I let his grandmother catch me looking at him with something soft in my eyes, because I had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous performances are the quiet ones. But underneath the table, my hand was steady on my phone, recording every word his grandmother said about the company's shares, the will, the conditions of inheritance. Every detail was a brick. I was building something. 3 weeks in, I found the first crack. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for the kitchen at 1 a.m., unable to sleep in a house that felt more like a museum than a home, when I heard voices from Adrian's study. Low, tense, careful. Can't keep stalling the Briggs contract, a man's voice was saying. If Okonkwo finds out you diverted the pension fund allocations, This isn't a scandal anymore. It's prison, Adrian. I stood frozen in the hallway, my bare feet silent on cold marble. It's temporary, Adrian's voice, tight in a way I hadn't heard before. The moment the merger clears, I move the money back. No one will ever know. People are already asking questions. Small shareholders, your grandmother's old associates. If this comes out before you inherit full control, it won't. A pause. You're playing a dangerous game. I've been playing this game my whole life, Adrian said, and something in his voice made my skin crawl. Not fear, but a coldness so practiced it sounded like comfort. I didn't get here by being careful. I got here by being smarter than everyone in the room. I walked back to my bedroom that night and didn't sleep at all. Adrian Okafor, golden boy of Lagos business media, heir to an empire built partly on my father's ruin, was quietly stealing from a pension fund to cover a hole in his own finances, and hiding it from the very grandmother whose blessing he needed to inherit everything. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was ammunition. Do you think a man that careful would notice a woman that careful watching him? He didn't, because he had already decided, from the very beginning, that I was a transaction, not a threat. And that mistake, that quiet arrogance, was the exact door I needed left open. I became indispensable in ways he didn't expect. I learned his schedule, his passwords habits, never the passwords themselves. I wasn't reckless. I was patient. His weaknesses. I learned that he called his mother every Sunday at exactly 4 p.m., voice softening into something almost human. I learned that beneath the ice, there was a boy who had been taught that love was a liability and money was the only language that never lied to him. I told myself that learning this didn't make me sympathize with him. I told myself that a lot, actually, because somewhere around month 2, something inconvenient happened. He started talking to me. Really talking. Late at night, after the staff had gone, after the performance had ended for the day, and there was no audience left to perform for. "Why do you never ask me for anything?" he asked one night. 2 glasses of wine between us on the balcony, the Lagos skyline glittering like it was trying to seduce both of us. Every woman I've ever known asks for something eventually. Maybe I already got what I wanted, I said carefully. 5 million naira. He said it like it tasted bitter in his mouth. That's really all you wanted? No, I thought. I wanted my father's cough to go away. I wanted my mother's hands to stop shaking. I wanted the company that destroyed my family to feel, for one single moment, what it feels like to lose everything. That's all. I lied. He studied me for a long moment, and something in his expression made my chest tighten uncomfortably. You're a terrible liar, Adiz. You have no idea, I thought. I've been lying to you since the day I sat in your office and pretended not to know your company's name. Maybe I just don't trust easily, I said instead, given the nature of our arrangement. Fair, he said quietly, and looked back out at the city. And for one dangerous, unwelcome moment, I almost forgot why I was there. I almost forgot that this man's signature was on the document that had bankrupted my father. I went to bed early that night and lay awake for hours, furious at myself for the almost tea happened at a company gala. The kind of event where old money and new money circled each other like sharks in expensive fabric, and where Adrian needed me most, on his arm smiling, performing the fairy tale for the board members whose confidence he needed to secure the merger that would finally hide his stolen pension funds for good. I was standing near the champagne table when an older man approached, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who remembered everything because forgetting had cost him money before. "Nwosu," he said slowly, studying my face. "You wouldn't happen to be related to Emeka Nwosu, would you? Logistics business, out in Apapa." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "He was my father," I said carefully. The old man's face shifted, surprise, then something like pity. "Terrible business. What happened there? I always thought the acquisition was handled aggressively." He glanced, almost involuntarily, toward Adrian, who was mid-conversation 20 feet away, unaware. "Young Okafor cut his teeth on that deal, you know. First major acquisition, he ran solo, made his reputation on it." I felt something cold and clarifying settle into my spine. "Is that so?" I said softly. "Small world," the old man said, already looking for his next conversation partner. already forgetting he'd just handed me a loaded weapon. I didn't confront Adrian that night. I smiled through 3 more hours of forced laughter and rehearsed affection, and I watched him from across every room, and I thought, soon, Grandmother Okafor was sharper than anyone gave her credit for, including, I would learn, her own grandson. She summoned me alone one afternoon, no staff, no Adrian, just the 2 of us in her private sitting room with tea neither of us touched. "You're not in love with him," she said. Not a question. My heart stopped for exactly 1 beat. "Ma, I've buried a husband and outlived 2 business partners who thought they were smarter than me," she said, eyes steady on mine. "I know performance when I see it. The question is why a woman as intelligent as you would agree to perform for a man like my grandson." I could have lied. I had lied to everyone in this house for 2 months straight. Something about her, the tiredness under the sharpness, the honesty in a house built entirely on dishonesty, made me pause. "Because I needed the money," I said. "Half true. And the other half?" she asked, as if she could read the hesitation in my silence. I looked at her for a long time. "Your grandson's company destroyed my father's business 4 years ago," I finally said. "Legally. Ruthlessly. Without a second thought. My father hasn't been the same man since. I came here for the money, Ma. But somewhere along the way, I started staying for something else." She was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know why I'm making him marry before I release his inheritance?" she asked finally. I shook my head. "Because I watched my grandson become exactly the kind of man who destroys families like yours and calls it business. I raised him to be strong. Instead, I made him hollow." Her voice cracked, just slightly, just once. "I thought if he had to build something real, even fake, even for 6 months, some part of him might remember he's capable of it. I didn't know I was pairing him with the daughter of one of his own victims. But perhaps," she said slowly, eyes glinting, "that isn't a coincidence at all. Perhaps that's exactly the reckoning this family needs." I sat in stunned silence. "I'm dying, Adiz," she said simply. "I don't have time for gentle lessons anymore. I have time for the truth. And I think you might be the only person in this house brave enough to give it to him." She reached over and placed her frail hand over mine. "Whatever you're planning," she said quietly, "make sure it teaches him something. Don't just destroy him. That would be a waste of a very rare opportunity." I left that room with my hands shaking and my plan sharpening into something far more precise than revenge. Something closer to justice that I spent the next month building my case like a woman laying bricks in the dark, quiet, careful, one at a time. I photographed documents left carelessly on his desk. During the nights, he trusted me enough to fall asleep in his study with me nearby, working on my laptop, playing the role of a wife who simply liked being near her husband. I recorded, carefully, legally, always on my own devices, always documenting only what was said in my presence. Conversations that revealed the shape of the pension fund diversion that I reached out, anonymously, to a financial journalist named Kelechi Obi, who had a reputation for exposing corporate fraud without fear, feeding her verified information one piece at a time, never revealing my identity, never revealing my connection to the company. And I reconnected carefully, secretly, with my father's old lawyer, a tired but brilliant man named Barrister Uche, who had spent 4 years wanting to reopen the case against Okafor Holdings, but lacking the evidence to prove the acquisition had involved falsified valuations. I had access now. I had proof now. I had a war chest. But the closer I got to detonating everything, the more complicated my nights became, because Adrian, without meaning to, without either of us wanting it, had started to become something more than a target. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because it was raining, the kind of Lagos rain that turns the city into a symphony of noise, when Adrian found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, staring at nothing. "You're always awake at strange hours," he said, leaning in the doorway. "So are you," I said. He sat across from me at the kitchen island, and for once, there was no performance in either of us. No staff watching. No grandmother to convince. No board members to impress. Just 2 exhausted people in a beautiful, empty house. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" he asked quietly. I nodded, my heart doing something complicated and unwelcome. "I don't actually know how to be loved," he said, staring at his hands, That am why father taught me that love was a transaction disguised as an emotion. My mother left when I was 9, walked out, no warning, no goodbye. And my father told me that day, people leave, Adrian. Money doesn't. I built my entire life around that sentence. He looked up at me, and there was something raw in his eyes I hadn't seen before, something that looked almost like fear. I've never once in my life asked for something without also planning what I'd do if I got rejected. Except with you. I don't know why. I sat very still, because everything in me, the anger, the plan, the careful architecture of revenge I had spent 3 months building, was suddenly colliding with something I hadn't planned for at all. I could have used that moment. I could have leaned into his vulnerability and twisted it into something sharper. I felt sorry for him. And worse, I felt something that wasn't pity at all. Adrian, I said carefully, do you know what your company did to Mosu Logistics 4 years ago? His brow furrowed. The Apapa acquisition? It was one of my first major deals. Why? Do you remember the details? I pressed. The valuation? The circumstances? It was clean, he said slowly, some old defensive instinct rising in his voice. We acquired a struggling company at fair market value. It happens every day in business. It wasn't struggling, I said quietly. It was thriving, until your team quietly pressured 3 of its biggest clients into breaking contracts right before the valuation, which crashed the company's worth by 60% overnight, right before your offer came in. That's not acquisition, Adrian. That's engineered collapse. The color drained slowly from his face. How do you know all that? I looked at him, really looked at him, memorizing this moment, because I knew, somewhere deep down, that everything was about to change. Because Emeka Nwosu was my father, I said. And I didn't come here for 5 million naira, Adrian. I came here because I wanted to watch you lose everything the way he did. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. He stood up so fast the chair scraped against marble like a scream. You're lying, he said, but his voice cracked in the middle of the sentence, betraying him. I'm not, I said, standing too, steady despite the way my whole body was shaking. I signed your contract knowing exactly who you were. I performed your fake marriage knowing exactly what your company took from my family. And every night you fell asleep thinking you were the one in control of this arrangement. I was documenting the pension fund fraud your friend warned you about 3 months ago. His face went through several emotions at once, disbelief, fury, and underneath it, something that looked almost like betrayal, which was almost funny, considering. You've been spying on me, he said. I've been surviving you. I corrected. There's a difference. Everything you said. He stopped, his jaw tight. Was any of it real? I hesitated, just for a second, just long enough for him to see it, and for me to hate myself for it. Some of it, I admitted quietly. That's the part one didn't plan for. He laughed, sharp, bitter, disbelieving. So what happens now? You expose me. Take my empire the way you think I took your father's. I already have enough to expose you, I said calmly. The pension fund diversion. The falsified valuation on the Apapa deal. Your grandmother's own testimony about the company's practices under your leadership. I've spent 3 months building a case, Adrian, and it's airtight. He went very still. Then why haven't you already destroyed me? I looked at him for a long moment, and I let myself, for the first time, tell him the truth I hadn't even fully admitted to myself. Because somewhere in the last 3 months, I said quietly, you stopped being just a name on a legal document to me. And I hate that. I hate that more than I've ever hated anything, because it should have made this easier, and instead it made it impossible. Neither of us heard the wheelchair. I already know everything, Grandmother Okafor said from the doorway, and both of us turned, stunned, to find her sitting there, wrapped in a shawl, eyes steady and unsurprised. I've known for a month. Grandmother, Adrian started. Sit down, Adrian, she said, and there was nothing frail about her voice now. It's time you both heard the truth. All of it. We sat. I've known about the pension fund for 6 weeks, she said. My old associate, the one you spoke to at the gala, Adiz. He's been reporting to me for years. I know about the Apapa acquisition. I've known for 4 years, actually, ever since it happened, because I insisted on reviewing every major deal this company made, even after I officially stepped back. Adrian stared at her, ashen. You knew, and you said nothing. I said nothing, she confirmed, because I wanted to see what kind of man you'd become when you thought no one was watching. And I am ashamed, Adrian, to tell you that the answer disappointed me deeply. Her voice softened, just slightly. But then this woman walked into your office, into your house, into your life, and something in her refused to let you get away with it. Something in her decided that consequences still mattered, even when it would have been easier, safer, and far more profitable to simply take the money and disappear. She turned to me. You could have taken your 5 million naira and left quietly at ease. You could have let the fraud continue, let the company keep growing on its rotten foundation, and no one would have ever known you had the power to stop it. Instead, you built a case. You risked everything, including, I suspect, your own heart, to make sure that what happened to your father would finally be answered for. She smiled, small and tired and proud. That is not revenge, child. That is justice with excellent timing. Grandmother, please. Adrian's voice broke completely now. All the polish gone. All the armor gone. Just a man staring at the wreckage of everything he thought he'd built. What happens now? She looked at him for a long, long moment. Now, she said, you have a choice you've never actually had to make in your entire life, Adrian. You can fight this. Hire lawyers. Bury the evidence. Protect the empire at any cost. The way your father taught you. Or you can do something your father never had the courage to do. Which is, fix it, she said simply. Return the pension funds. Reopen the Alpapa case and offer the Nwosu family fair restitution, not because a court forces you to, but because it's right. Restructure the company under real oversight. Become, for once in your life, a man worth the name you inherited instead of a man who merely profited from it. The room was silent for a long time, that I won't pretend the next few weeks were simple. They weren't. Adrian didn't transform overnight into some redeemed hero. That would be a lie. And I promised myself, whatever else happened, I wouldn't lie anymore. Not even in the telling of this story. He fought the truth for 3 days. He raged. He accused me of manipulation, of using his grandmother's illness, of turning his own family against him. He said things in anger that I know, even now, he didn't fully mean, and some things that I suspect he did. But on the 4th day, he came to my room, the room he'd given me on the East Wing, the one that had never quite felt like a prison and never quite felt like home, and he sat down across from me, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely lost. I looked at the old files, he said quietly. The Alpapa acquisition. I was 28. I remember being proud of that deal. I remember my father telling me I'd finally made him proud. He laughed, hollow and humorless. I never once thought about the people on the other side of the contract. I never thought about you, or your father, or what happens to a family when everything they built for 15 years disappears because someone smarter and hungrier decided they wanted it more. Now you know, I said quietly. Now I know, he agreed. He looked up at me. What do you want me to do, Adiz? Not the company, not the legal restitution. You, what do you want from me? I thought about that question for a long time, longer than I'd thought about almost anything in my entire life. I want my father to be able to sleep through the night without waking up in a panic about money he doesn't have. I finally said, I want the pension fund employees who trusted your company to get every naira back with interest. I want the Alpapa case reopened publicly, not quietly settled to protect your reputation. And I want you, I added, my voice quieter now, to actually become the man your grandmother sees in you, instead of the one your father built. And us, he asked, whatever this was, whatever it became, is there anything left of it once the truth is out? I didn't have an answer for him that night. I still don't know, honestly, if I have one now. The story broke 3 weeks later. Not through a leak, not through scandal journalism designed to humiliate, but through a carefully coordinated public statement issued jointly by Okafor Holdings and an independent financial oversight board. Adrian stood in front of cameras. No performance this time, no polish, just a man in a slightly wrinkled suit telling the truth in front of the entire country. He confirmed the pension fund diversion. He announced full restitution with interest, funded personally from his own holdings. not the companies. He announced the reopening of the Apapa acquisition case, and, publicly, on camera, voice steady despite everything it clearly cost him. He named my father, apologized to him directly, and announced a full financial settlement for Nwosu Logistics, along with a public acknowledgement that the original acquisition had been built on manufactured circumstances. My father watched that broadcast from his hospital bed, my mother's hand in his, and for the first time in 4 years, I watched him cry. Not from grief, but from something that looked, finally, like relief. The board didn't fire Adrian. His grandmother, still alive, still sharp, still the largest shareholder, made sure of that, insisting instead on independent oversight, new compliance structures, and a public accountability period that would either prove Adrian capable of real change or end his career permanently. He chose to stay. He chose to rebuild slower, harder, with far less glamour than the empire he'd inherited a taste for. I didn't take the second half of my 5 million naira. I know how that sounds. I know it doesn't sound like the ending anyone expects from a story like this. But by the time the contract's 6 months ended, the money had stopped being the point. My father's medical bills were covered, not by Adrian's guilt money, but by the settlement his own company owed us, legally, publicly, undeniably ours. My sister's tuition was secured the same way. The debt that had shaped 4 years of our lives had finally, properly, been paid, not as charity, but as justice on the last day of our 6 months. Adrian found me packing the small bag I'd arrived with, because even after everything, I had never let myself unpack fully into that house, some old instinct always keeping one foot toward the door. "You don't have to leave," he said quietly from the doorway. "The contract's over," I said, not looking up. That was always the deal. Forget the contract. His voice was rougher than I had ever heard it. "I'm not asking you to stay because of a piece of paper, Adiz. I'm asking because these 6 months were the only time in my entire life I felt like someone actually saw me. Not my money, not my name, not what I could give them, just me. And somehow, even after everything you learned about who I really was, even after everything I did to your family, you stayed long enough to make me want to become someone worth staying for." I turned to face him, my bag half-packed, my heart doing something complicated and unwilling. "I came into your life to destroy you," I said quietly. "I know. I'm still not sure I forgive you completely. For my father, for everything the acquisition cost my family." "I know that too," he said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness tonight. I'm asking for a chance to earn it. Slowly, honestly, however long that takes." I stood there for a long time, caught between two versions of the story I could tell. The clean revenge story, where I walked away having burned it all down and never looked back, satisfied and untouched. And the messier, truer story, where somewhere in the middle of building a case against a man, I had also, unwillingly, unexpectedly, started building something else. I set my bag down, not because I'd forgiven him, not because 6 months of contract had turned into something simple, but because for the first time since I'd walked into his office with a folder full of my family's desperation, I finally got to choose something for myself. Not survival, not revenge, not obligation, just a choice. And I chose to stay long enough to see who he'd become. Some people don't destroy you because they hate you. Sometimes they destroy you because it's the only way to finally make you see the truth, and pray you survive it long enough to build something honest from the wreckage.